Well, interestingly enough, I want to talk for just a second about solar thermal because we haven't talked about that yet. And there's, of course, a lot of rumbling in the incentive programs for solar thermal right now. And a lot of people are wondering when is or is it going to be something that's going to be worth doing down the road. The biggest problem in Colorado, especially, and probably most parts of the country, is that most of our homes that we live in are gas forced air. And most of the solar companies that are doing solar thermal are doing solar thermal hot water. Now, I don't have a problem with solar thermal hot water, except that if you're spending $20,000 to save about $4 a month, it's going to take about 700 years to pay for itself. And that's an exaggeration, but what I'm trying to say is that there's a better way, I feel, to do that. And one of the projects that we've been involved in is a house up in Boulder that had an old, anybody remember Novan? Anyone? Solar company from way, way back when in the 70s? Well, they're actually back in action again, but that's something you guys can look into if you want, but talk to Jeff instead. Anyway, they had installed a 2-panel solar system in a home up in Boulder in the 70s, and it had a 120-gallon solar tank. And the system was working fine. It was, had been working fine for 30 years, and so they never thought anything of it, never really paid much in the summertime for their gas bills to heat their water because the solar was doing it all. And what we did, one of our favorite things to do is what we call an integrated system, where we actually go into a home that has an elderly gas-forced air furnace, not so old that it's falling apart at the seams, but something within this century, okay, not looking like an octopus or anything, but a standard gas-forced air furnace is nothing more than a fan in a box, and we all know that. And so what often we will do is go in and utilize that existing fan and that existing box and pull the heat exchanger and the burners and the gas valve out and install a hot water coil. Well, this is the type of system that's been used in commercial applications for years and years and years. Every building in downtown Denver that you go in is most likely heated with some type of hydronics to air heat exchange. Excuse me, with, say, a central boiler, air handlers in all the offices. The thermostat calls for heat, hot water goes through the air handler, bringing heat into the office. So we're using that same principle, and what we're basically doing is going into a conventional gas-forced air furnace, and rather than throwing it in the landfill, that makes us a little bit more eco, doesn't it? We're actually taking what we have, we're reusing the existing furnace, installing a hot water coil in there, and turning it into a hot water air handler. Well, it does several things. First thing it does is it simplifies the system. It also renders it pretty harmless. The problems with standard gas-forced air furnaces, especially the older ones, is they have no safety features. There's really no way for that furnace to tell you, because it's not going to wake you up in the middle of the night. In fact, quite the opposite, right? So we don't want those kinds of problems, and you eliminate those when you have a hot water coil in a furnace. There's no longer any combustion byproducts being produced at the furnace. We then use a tankless water heater such as Rinnai or one of the other brands that is a sealed combustion unit, and that is what's creating hot water for our domestic use as well as for space heat via that coil in the furnace. Just like the radiator in your car, when the fan comes on the furnace, it blows air across that coil and brings hot air into the house. So we're really accomplishing the same thing that we accomplished with the existing furnace, except we're doing it with what's called infinite modulation. You no longer have a furnace that either fires at 0 or 100,000 BTUs. That's like having a sports car with the gas pedal stuck to the floor, right? And trying to hit the brakes and slow the thing down. Well, that's a problem with a standard furnace. There's no in between. Modulation is today's answer, according to ASHRAE. They're finding out that to modulate a burner is where you gain a lot of efficiency. The best analogy I can give you guys is that let's take the most efficient V8 that comes out of Detroit and stick it in a Jetta. What kind of mileage is the Jetta going to get? Probably not very good, right? You still got a V8 engine, no matter how efficient that engine is. In fact, Detroit is now starting to modulate their engines where they shut off a few cylinders. Anyway, back to the project. We took this 1970s home, we put a tankless water heater in, we converted the furnace over to a hot water air handler. We put a diverter in so that her minimal solar system, I mean really, just supposedly barely capable of just heating her hot water, during the hours from 8 in the morning, 7:30 in the morning to about 10 at night, was actually producing enough heat so that the tankless water heater never even came on. Her bills last year in the dead of winter were $22 a month. This is an 1,800 square foot tri-level home. Did she spend money for that solar system? Well, somebody did. And somebody got some pretty good tax credits for it back in the 70s, didn't they? Right? So this is what's coming down the pike, and this is the kind of integration that I'm talking about that I get excited about, because we can oftentimes use more of what we have in a house than we think. We're all sort of rip it out and put a new one happy, just like we're trade in your 5-year-old car and get a new one happy. Well, we got to change that way of thinking, I think. It hasn't been that way in Europe for a really long time. Not that they're any better than we are, but they learned a long time ago that you got to make better use of what you have. So that's kind of what my company was founded on 17 years ago, and we've since kind of climbed the ladder with that and really done a lot more with less than I think we could have before. The cost of that system, basically tankless water heater installation and integration of the furnace, is about $4,000, $4,500. So to put out a comparison to you guys, let's take a 92% efficient sealed combustion furnace, which is a wonderful product. You're probably going to spend that to replace a conventional furnace with a 90% furnace, that plus. And I think the problem with that is you're sort of stuck with gas. And I don't mean to be political here, but at some point, the move might just be in our lifetimes to get away from fossil fuels. What do you think? I could be wrong. I don't know.